Henry was a happy engine once again. He had been let out of his tunnel. He was now back to work, pulling the heavy express with Edward. The two engines were running the train until Gordon's burst safety valve had been mended. It was the next day when Gordon returned to work. "It's good to be back," he said. "I did miss the express yesterday. Thank you for taking care of it." Edward and Henry smiled. They both had fun pulling it. "We look splendid pulling it," said Henry. "You look even smarter when you've been repainted." Gordon chuckled. "Blue is a proper color for an engine." Henry smiled. He was looking forward to his repaint. He had had to wait for Gordon to return to work before getting his reward. "I hear you've got a special job yourself," said Henry. Gordon was surprised. "A special job? I didn't know. What is it?" "I think it's a special express train," said Edward. "Driver says it leaves early tomorrow morning." Gordon liked the sound of that. "Two express trains tomorrow? Just what a fine engine needs. It will be nice to have a good run." Edward and Henry were happy for Gordon, and the three engines chatted happily for the rest of the evening, which kept the other engines awake. The driver and fireman arrived early the next morning, but Gordon was already awake. "So, you know about the special train," said the driver. "Yes, I do," said Gordon. "We better be off as soon as we can." The driver laughed as the fireman lit the fire. Soon, they had made a nice lot of steam. The lever was pulled, and Gordon puffed away to find his train. But when he found his train, he was shocked. "Trucks?" Gordon cried. "Yes, trucks," said the driver. "It's a special express goods train. It must get to the end of the line quickly. That's why you were chosen." Gordon was cross. "I don't pull dirty trucks." But there was nothing he could do. He moaned as the shunter fastened the coupling. The guard blew his whistle from his van, and Gordon slunk away. "It's not right, it's not right, it's not right," he thought as he left. As he puffed away, Lucille passed by on the other line, laughing as she went. Gordon was crosser still, and made a face at her. "If I'm to pull trucks, I won't be seen pulling them," he said to himself as he began to go faster. Soon he was puffing quickly along, as fast as he went with the express. Towns, fields, and bridges flashed by as Gordon sped past. "Hurry, hurry, hurry," he puffed to himself. He was going so quickly that the trucks dared not to make a sound. Gordon puffed so quickly that he arrived at the station early. Everyone was very impressed. Gordon was too cross to care. He was uncoupled from the trucks and set off back home to collect his express. The fat director was waiting for him when he arrived. "Well, Gordon, you've done a splendid job," he said, "but I think we'll let some of the other engines manage the trucks for now. You make a fine goods engine, but you need an even better express engine." Gordon was happy, and with that, he steamed away. James had not pulled passengers in a long while. Sir Topham Hatt had punished him for being lazy and having Henry take his train. The big green engine was now at the works for repairs, leaving James with all his goods work. In James's absence, the service had become so popular extra coaches had been added to the train, making it much longer and heavier to pull. As James topped up on water, he watched as 8 coaches were shunted into the station. "Blimey," muttered the driver. "Gordon will have his work cut out for him pulling that lot." "Pah! Who cares? The passengers should be treated to a splendid journey by a splendid engine like me," snorted James rudely as his fireman finished filling up his tender. Lots of the passengers came and crowded the station platform. James felt very jealous as he watched Gordon glide to a stop in front of the coaches. He looked very grand. "Hello there, Widow James. Still acting like a goods engine, are you? Oh well, I suppose we can't all pull the express." Gordon grinned. James, from his isolated siding, rolled his eyes, but Gordon didn't care. The conductor's whistle blew, and with a sharp whistle, Gordon snorted away. His wheels slipped as he dragged the heavy coaches out of the station. James was about to set off to arrange his train when he noticed something. There, at the back of the train, was a very tired Percy. "What are you doing back there?" asked James sharply. Percy was still trying to catch his breath. At last, he explained about how he had been helping the express start by pushing it. "It's exhausting. I have to do all the heavy work while Gordon gets all the praise." James started laughing, taking Percy off guard. "Ha! Gordon still needs a push to get started. I'd be humiliated if I needed a baggage to push behind my train." James chortled away as Percy let off steam crossly. A few days later, Sir Topham Hatt came to speak to James in the sheds. James looked a little worried. "I've been very impressed with all your hard work of recent, James. Henry will be returning from the work soon, so how would you like to pull the express again?" "Oh, yes, please, sir," whistled James happily. Sir Topham Hatt smiled and tipped his hat to his engine. He turned and stepped into his car. James's crew prepared his fire and set off to the station. He backed onto his coaches, and the passengers boarded the long train. Percy was waiting at the back of the train to help it start, but James was having none of it. "Clear off, little Percy. I don't need a grubby little engine like you spoiling the look of my train." Percy was most offended. He steamed away, muttering under his breath. At last, the conductor blew his whistle, and James responded with a whim, his wheels spinning furiously. "Don't need a back engine, don't need a back engine," he growled, as with one final slip, he got the train into motion, hauling out of the station. Soon James was flying down the line. Now he was moving the train with greater ease, but James had to admit to himself the train was much too heavy for him. "Never mind, I'll do it, never mind, I'll do it," he puffed to himself. But as he neared Wellsworth, his driver checked his speed and began to put on the brakes. "What's going on?" demanded James. "Why are we stopping?" "We'll need to call for a banker for the hill," called the driver. "Rubbish! I could do it myself," pouted James, but his driver just laughed. "You'll never manage it alone, not with all these coaches." James rode to a stop at the platform, whistling loudly for a banker. Loco had just arrived at the yards and was shunting freight cars when James whistled out. "Don't worry, James," he called. "I'll be with you in a minute." James let off steam indignantly. "Being helped by a diesel! The shame of it! I'd rather have dirty Percy at this point," he groaned. But there was nothing he could do. When Boco was ready, the train started off for the hill, with James still groaning. Now, James is a mixed traffic engine. He can pull coaches and freight cars quite easily. But although he is considered a big engine, he is smaller and weaker than Gordon and Henry. While he can pull heavy trains, like the Express, his one big weakness is gradients. He had a history of struggling on Gordon's hill with the Express before, and had forgotten it. But as he started up the hill with Boco, he suddenly had to admit to himself that he was thankful that Diesel was there. Come on, panted James. We're doing it, called Boco. They were just about to reach the top when, with a loud whistle, Gordon tore down the hill on the other side with a goods train. When he saw James being helped by Boco, he laughed. "Ho ho! Feeling the strain, are we, James?" he called as he passed. James became very angry, too angry that he began slipping violently on the hill. Boco was very surprised as he now had the weight of the whole train on him. He hooted at James in alarm. "James, correct your slipping! I can't hold the train!" There came a loud snap. The train stalled on the hill as the engine's crew jumped out of the cabs to see what had happened. It didn't take them long to find the problem. James's side rods had broken in half. "Oh, you silly engine! All your slipping damaged your coupler, which caused your side rods to break. You won't be able to take this train any further," scolded the driver. James became flustered and looked shamefaced at his buffers. His driver then spoke to Boco's driver about taking the train on. "I don't think Boco has the pulling power to carry on alone, unless—" Boco's driver had made a plan. Meanwhile, Henry was building up steam in the works. He hadn't suffered much damage and was excited to go home. Then he heard a horn come from the station. He looked over and saw Boco at the head of the express. Boco then moved off the train and headed to the back. "Hello, Boco," called Henry as the diesel rode towards the works. "Who is that you're shunting?" It was James. Boco placed him right next to Henry. James blushed, and Boco winked. "Oh, pay no attention to him, Henry. He's just my back engine. Not an important role after all," teased Boco. Henry chortled as James went redder than ever. Just then, the station master came to see Henry about finishing the express journey. "I'd be more than happy to. It wouldn't be the first time I fill in for James." And the big green engine puffed away. James is now a lot more cautious while taking any train. He is never shy to ask for help from a back engine, and he is a much wiser engine too. One evening, Daisy ambled into the top station. She saw Toby and Terence nearby, enraptured in conversation. "Such a delightful specimen," cheered Terence. Daisy felt flattered. "Why, thank you, my dear." Toby couldn't stifle a laugh. "We weren't talking about you." "No, something better," added Terence, the disdainful look on Daisy's face not deterring his gay chatter. "We are talking about whiskey." "Farmer Wade's new horse," explained Toby. Daisy groaned. "A horse? All this about a horse? What rubbish!" Toby and Terence didn't think whiskey was rubbish, nor did the village people. Next day, Daisy felt her passengers would talk of nothing else. "Fancy getting excited by a daft animal," grunted Daisy. "It's a fine, noble creature," replied her driver. "Not feeling jealous, are we?" murmured Toby at the station by the river. That, of course, made Daisy's temper even fouler. She flounced away with a dramatic fury, but as she made her way down the line, a surprise stood waiting for her. She had barely left the tunnel when she came face to face with Whiskey. "Oh!" she hissed. "Stop!" Luckily, she stopped clear of the stray steed. Daisy had made such a noisy stop that Whiskey had turned and bolted. "Stupid thing must have escaped from its field," grumbled the driver. "I told you it was daft," snapped Daisy. "Best mention this to Farmer Wade," sighed the driver. "Must have broken a fence." They set off again, Daisy now feeling justified in her disdain for Whiskey. "I said it wasn't worth the fuss," she busted that night. "Fancy making me late. Animals are simply no good to anyone." She had been rambling all night. Thomas and Percy had retired in irritated huffs, but Toby was kept up by Daisy's gloats. "There is nothing wrong with animals," he replied at last. "Besides, I'd hardly expected an engine as capable as you to be severely delayed by such a simple thing." Daisy wisely decided to go to sleep after that. But next morning, once Toby had departed for the junction, she was back on form. "Forget silly horses," she cooed to the passengers. "You should admire a proper sight, like me." The passengers boarded swiftly, and Daisy glided away. The run down the branch went well at first. "Silly thing, no good at all," thought Daisy as she popped out of the tunnel. But as she neared the cutting, she was shocked. Whiskey had wandered free once again, but this new adventure was even more of a disaster. His head was stuck in the fence beside the line. Whiskey was in a dreadful state. "Oh, the poor thing! We must do something to help," cried Daisy. whose demeanor had instantly changed. "We can't leave it here all alone." Daisy made such a fuss, her driver stopped her. A brief inquiry amongst the passengers yielded a vet. Although inexperienced with horses, they led an effort of several passengers, and Daisy's driver to calm poor Whiskey and set him free. The guard had run back to the cinnabox to warn of the delay and to send for Farmer Waite, who was quickly on the scene. "Why, bless you all," he sighed, "I hadn't time to mend my fence yesterday. Old Whiskey seems to like the wide world. Perhaps this may teach him to stay home." "Think nothing of it," said all the passengers involved. "It's Daisy you should think. She insisted that something must be done." "What an extraordinary engine," cheered Farmer Waite kindly. Daisy blushed brightly. At last, she set off again. The passengers hadn't minded their adventure, despite its delay. When she reached the next station, Daisy found Toby and Terence gossiping. "What delayed you this time?" mused Toby. "A sheep?" The excited wave of passengers quickly filled the two in, both of whom were fully entertained. "Well, well, well," chortled Terence. "Would you ever?" "Look who's like horses after all," chirped Toby. "Oh, pooh!" scoffed Daisy. "This just proves my point. They get in the way and delayed an engine. No good at all. These daft creatures." She flounced away without another word. To this day, Daisy insists her opinions on animals, especially horses, haven't changed. But Toby and Terence think she's only pretending. Don't you? Tank engines like Thomas can go backward just as easily as they can go forward. For tender engines like Gordon, going forward is much easier for them. One windy day, Thomas was going backward, moving some trucks across the yard. Gordon saw him and said, "Look at you, Thomas. I always said you were a backward engine." Gordon continued, "You should move forward like me." Gordon was only joking, because he knows Thomas is a real useful engine. Gordon went off to pull the express. He was steaming quickly across the countryside when he saw something on the track up ahead. "Stop! Stop!" he shouted to his driver. The driver shut off the steam and applied the brakes. Gordon came to a stop in front of a tree that had been blown down and now lay across the tracks. Gordon's fireman ran off to find a telephone to call the cinnamon. Meanwhile, the passengers were getting upset because their train had been stopped. The driver said, "If we can't get this tree moved, Gordon, you will have to go backward to the last station we passed and let the passengers off there." Gordon didn't like the sound of that. Just then, Terence the tractor appeared by the railway. "Hello, Gordon," he said. "I met your fireman who told me you were stuck." Ropes were tied around the fallen tree and attached to Terence. Terence pulled backwards on the ropes, then pushed the tree forward to make it loose. At last, he was able to drag the tree off the track. The passengers cheered. Gordon blew his whistle and was off again. That night, when the engines were in their shed after a hard day's work, Gordon told Thomas all about his day. "Sometimes," he said, "being able to go backward as well as forward is very helpful." Duck is a tank engine. Sometimes he works on the same line as James. James's trucks were on the line. He began going backward to get them. Going backward, James bumped his tender. It shuddered and stopped. "It's dangerous for tender engines to go backward," said Duck. "I'll go." So he did. Then he went forward, pushing the trucks towards James. "Duck," said James, "I can go forward further, but you can go backward better."